Our Dobber Prospects rankings are officially out. We'll break down our top 32 for the 2024 NHL draft, talking about Macklin Celebrini, Cole Eiserman, and a lot more coming up on today's show of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi and joined by Sebastian. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down our Dobber Prospects scouting team's top 32 for the 2024 NHL Draft. Sebastian's the head of scouting. I'm the head of North American scouting, and we'll be breaking down the top 32. We wrote it ourselves, and we'll be kind of breaking down how our team kind of reached consensus and what the rankings are from 1 to 32, including our honorable mentions. We'll talk about Macklin Celebrini, Ivan Demidov, Sam Dickinson, and a lot more. We'll talk about all the top 32 players that we've ranked. So be sure to stick around to the end, kind of know how we kind of rank our top 32 so far. Before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So let's get this started, Sebastian. It's an exciting time. We got our first rankings out with our team. Let's break it down. Obviously, first overall, I think is a consensus among every scouting team, and for good reason. Macklin Celebrini is our first prospect ranked at first overall in our top 32. Just to read you a bit of what I wrote about him. First and foremost, I mean, the list of NCAA draft eligibles who in the 1990s, since the 1990s, have exceeded Macklin Celebrini's 2-point a game pace so far for BU has one name on it, and it's Paul Kariya, almost 30 years ago. That gives you a good idea of kind of where he ranks among NCAA players who played in that league in their draft year. He's above Adam Fantilli and Jack Eichel, both of whom are around 1.80 points a game. And he's at 2 points a game so far through 9 games. And what's funny is Fantilli and Eichel were October birthdays. Celebrini's a June birthday. He's almost 8 months younger than them at the same age in this draft year. And yeah, he's outproducing them both. So yeah, Celebrini is kind of the consensus here. We don't want to spend too much time on him because we talk about him a lot. At second overall, though, a player who doesn't make unanimity, a player that you wrote about and that you really like, and I think that we both really like here at second overall, Ivan Demidov. Talk me through him.
Yeah, I mean, Demidov was one of our absolute favorites, and he was also our unanimous choice at number 2 during our meeting. Both Celebrini and Demidov were completely unanimous, and thankfully we got past the top 2 pretty quickly, so we could save our time for the glut of players that awaited us in the teens and 20s that we had to order that are all in the same range. But Demidov is a really special talent, the best puck handler that we've seen since at least Jack Hughes. Really dynamic, so creative, unbelievably escapable. Not to say he's a perfect player, right? But this is a highly skilled winger who also has a pretty decent motor to boot. So really interesting piece here.
Absolutely. And speaking of not spending too much time on the top 2, let's go right to 3. 3 and 4, actually. We've got a pair of defenders from the OHL. We've got Sam Dickinson at 3, left-handed defenseman, plays a really old-school meat and potatoes game, but really has incorporated some tools that really work with this game. First and foremost, defensively, by far and away the best defenseman in this draft. And he's a really good skater, not just for his size, but overall. Jordan Harris has this to say about him: players of Dickinson's size and athleticism profile will always grab scouts' attention. Combine that prototypical frame with excellent skating and advanced defending, and you get a player with early first round potential. And that's definitely the case with Dickinson. And And in Zayne Parekh, you've got a player who's the polar opposite completely. He's a dynamic offensive force. He's a right-handed defenseman who loves to carry the puck, quarterbacks a power play extremely well, but has his defensive lackings. But the defensive lackings have been kind of counterpointed with really good skating modifications in his game. He's closing gaps early. He's getting involved in transitions defensively in ways that he wasn't before. So the fact that that's grown in his game on top of just the runaway offensive potential with him solidifies his ranking in our top 5. And it was a neck and neck conversation. That was clear when I was speaking, when Jordis was speaking, and when you were speaking about him, when the whole team was speaking about him overall. It was very clear that these two guys were neck and neck. And yeah, we might see them flipped around one day, but for the moment, Dickinson's profile is just, you can't ignore it. It's a great profile for a defenseman. But yeah, at 5th overall, we have Cole Yzerman, and Yzerman usually shows up earlier than this. We've seen him mostly at 2nd or 3rd overall. But I think all of us have our reservations regarding the profile here because he's a great offensive creator. He's a great shooter. He's a great off-puck mover. But what does he have outside of that, really, that kind of supports his ability to get the puck in the offensive zone, right?
I mean, he finds the soft ice really well. He has some physicality that he can use in flashes. All the tools are kind of there, but they just haven't come together into a cohesive toolkit just yet. And while he is scoring a ton of goals, it really is primarily because of his really high-end shot and off-puck movement. And the rest of his game will really have to support those high-end tools in order for him to keep scoring at ridiculously high paces once he increases in levels of competition. But he's definitely a player that could end up as high as number 2 on our board come the end of the season. He's very young for this draft class. The goal scoring upside is really unmatched this year. And he is, when he's on his game, one of the most electrifying players that we have here. But the big issue is that it still primarily comes off puck offensively, and his on puck game needs some fine tuning. His handling needs some more work. The playmaking game definitely needs to at least be used more frequently. And the defensive game is painful at times. So definitely a lot to work out there, but the upside is so high. And I think our number 5 ranking reflects both of those stances.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, with David Sod, our new scout for the USA region, had to say about him in this article that will be linked below. You'll be able to check it out. He says, whether by improving his passing game, skating, or defensive ability, Yzerman needs to evolve his game to match his current reputation as an elite prospect. Fortunately, he has plenty of time to do so. Moving on to number 6, we've got Konsta Helenius out of the Jokerit Helsinki program in Finland, who I believe is our he's kind of our top center out of Europe right now. Really solid in terms of his playmaking ability, in terms of his intelligence. He understands the game at a really high level. Annie Karvinen, who's also a new scout on our team for Finland and Central Europe, had this to say about him. He can create offense in multiple ways. His passing is accurate and well-timed. He's got a sneaky good shot as well. However, Helenius truly excels when he takes control in the offensive zone, skillfully dangling through opponents and uncovering unforeseen passing or shooting lanes. That definitely fits the mold for Helenius. He's a skilled offensive player with insane intelligence, and I'm looking forward to see how he kind of develops his game as the year goes. And yeah, physicality needs to will be worked up, but overall, just a great talent. Then at 7 and 8, we've got two more players who are neck and neck.
They were neck and neck.
Yeah, Berkly Catton and Cayden Lindstrom. I think we spent a solid amount of time on these two, trying to figure out who we have in which order. Luke Sweeney, who's our WHL scout, really likes Berkly Catton. The electrifying pace, the stick handling skill, the clutch ability, puck protection, dangling. I mean, he's got so much in his toolbox that I think we can't really ignore him at this stage. And yeah, even if I think both of us would be on board with having Lindstrom ahead.
At least my sense during the meeting was that it was kind of like me and then all the non-WHL regionals that were kind of like, Cayden Lindstrom's the name here. And then you and Luke were kind of like, but Berkly Catton, we have to go Berkly Catton. And I understand too, like with Catton, we have a far longer track record of high-end skill, high-end production. Lindstrom is very much coming into his own this season, and the progression of the last 6 months has been unbelievable. but the sample's still a little bit smaller. But I think I personally would have gone Lindstrom over Catton, just as I would have gone Parekh over Dickinson. But
Yeah.
I'm always a big fan of those raw, high upside players, so I think
Yeah.
it's pretty understandable.
Absolutely. And yeah, the issue I think that led Lindstrom to be lower is, and it pretty much encapsulated this in the first sentence of that breakdown. It's hard to get a grasp on his true upside. I'm not
Yeah.
really on board with what exactly his ceiling is. And I think that'll kind of get clear as the year goes on, and more likely than not, they end up being flipped in our January or February rankings, that kind of thing. But we'll get there when we get there. But to close out the top 10, at 9th overall, we have Michael Brenzak-Newgard, a right winger, a solid, really solid right winger who's picked up his offensive
Really good
game.
player.
Yeah, I mean, two-way game is fantastic. The puck protection is really good. But on top of that, he has some untapped offensive skill that hasn't shown yet because the production hasn't been there yet. But in recent games, he's been a bit better production-wise, and I think it's just a matter of time before it picks up. There's been a lot of bad bounces in this game, and yeah, you can read our article and kind of see what I have to say about Brenzak-Newgard. I'm a big fan. And to close things off, David Saad made a big push for Artyom Levshunov at 10th overall, and I agree. Honestly, there's a lot to love in this game. The mobility, the IQ, the physical prowess in his game, but also the kind of the budding flashes of defensive game that have kind of begun to become a bit more consistent in this game overall as the years gone on in Michigan State. But that wraps things up for the top 10. Now we'll go through picks 11 through 20 in our second segment here. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to LED headlights and exhaust kits and far more, eBay Motors has everything you need to keep your vehicle up to par. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With over 122 million parts for your ride, you'll always get exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, which is only available to U.S. customers. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
All right, so moving on to our second segment, we'll go through picks 11 through 20 here and kind of make our way down the list. We'll start at 11th overall, where we have the towering 6'7" left-handed defenseman Anton SIlayev out of Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod in the KHL. Talk me through his game, because I think if it was up to you, he'd be higher than this, right?
I lost my 3 head-to-head battles in the top 11, but I also would have gone SIlayev over Levshunov. That was another debate that we had. I had a little bit more luck later on in our first round of kind of counting the table for my guys, but all those matchups that we're talking about here were really tight, and SIlayev, in my mind, is one of the toolsiest defensemen in this draft class. He has an unbelievable reach. He covers so much ice. Yes, he's really raw. His decision-making needs a lot of work, but it's improved a lot over the last couple months, and I value that. He's still often over-aggressive when defending the rush, but he's more composed than he was when he started the season, and overall, I've really, really liked my game-to-game viewings from him and how he's progressed between them, because consistently, every time I watch him, he's a decent bit better than the last time I did. So I value that type of progression. I think that he's really toolsy. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Despite the warts, despite the raw upside, I think that SIlayev is going to be a long-term top 4 NHL defenseman who has value on both sides of the puck as a physical defender and also a decent passer in transitions. And I think that he's versatile enough to really bring value inside a top 4, and definitely big enough to get drafted high. So we'll see how his development goes.
Absolutely. And then at 12 and 13, we have 2 more European prospects. First and foremost, we have Igor Chernyshov at 12th overall. I wrote this about him. His MHL tape is just unfair. And I think we say that a lot on this podcast. He just bullies opponents along the boards, or easily strips them of possession, and then makes small area passes to open teammates with ease and accuracy that leaves opponents scrambling to keep up. Once in the open ice, especially after 3 of his large strides, he can't be caught. But I think the KHL tape is really what puts him in this range for me. The adaptability is shown, the versatility in his game, the ability to adjust small things in his game where, oh, my skating's not enough to separate, my physicality's not enough to separate. How do I work around that? I think he's done that fantastically well in the KHL, even though he's playing like 30 seconds a night on some games. But yeah, that's nothing new for the KHL. At 13th overall, we have Aron Kiviharju. Kiviharju has suffered a major injury and will probably be out for a long time, but we still believe in the upside. And Annie Karvinen, our Finland scout, thinks the same. She says that he thinks the game on a level that only few can. He anticipates plays exceptionally well and makes smart decisions with and without the puck. He's a great passer and a showcase strong deceptive playmaking skills on the blue line on a junior level. I think the Liga tape isn't there yet, but you have to keep in mind a lot of these prospects are more used to playing against their age group, and there's an adaptation curve required with that. But I think Kiviharju is still worth a 13th overall pick. And at 14 and 15, we'll also have European prospects, so a big lot of Europeans here.
Yeah.
Talk me through Adam Jiricek. You wrote his profile here for our rankings.
Yeah, Adam Jiricek is a player that I've watched a lot of, and every viewing is kind of difficult for me. The tools are insane. He is unbelievably violent for a player who's listed at 152 pounds right now. He's 6'1" or something, but he plays like he's about 215 pounds. He plays a heavy game against pro competition, never afraid to get involved physically, and it's a real strength already against the pros. So once he adds some weight to that frame, it's going to be a scary sight, but it really will be. And we've seen flashes of really impressive offensive talent and overall offensive activations, especially internationally. Like at the Hlinka, we saw that quite a bit. He was really commanding presence on the ice for Czechia in that tournament and was really the QB of every offensive zone sequence that he was on the ice for. And that just hasn't really been there very much this season in my viewings. And I've watched him significantly both against the pros and against U20 competition. And it's been a really tough time for him this year. He's been really hesitant whenever he's had the puck on a stick, whenever he's pressured, consistently making poor decisions under pressure. But it's still early on in the season, and we've seen enough flashes of really high-end skill that he kind of forced his way into our top 15 because this isn't the deepest draft class in the world. And he didn't garner much enthusiasm in this slot, but he landed here anyways. And there's a decent chance he ends up inside the top 12 or 10 by the end of the season if he can pick up his form a bit. But yeah, he's been definitely tumultuous to start the year.
For sure. And at 15, Nikita Artymonov, also from the Torpedo program in the KHL. Graham Montgomery, who's a Russian scout for this year, describes him as just he's the definition of he's got that dog in him. I agree. I love the effort level. I love the intensity, especially on the forecheck. And it really compensates for his lack of kind of top end skating. He's got a really inefficient stride. But because of that effort level, the output is fantastic. I mean, he's still able to get around opponents, to outwork them to space, and really just plays everything. Everything he does is done at kind of the highest speed he can muster, which is kind of what you want out of him. On top of that, he's got really good skill on the puck. So definitely worth a mention here in our top 15. At 16th overall, we have Luke Misa, center of the Mississauga Steelheads. It's very easy to spot him on the ice. He's constantly the fastest and most, the most quick in terms of the playing pace that he has, player on the ice in the OHL. And he's just very noticeable. Defensively, there's some improvement left, but I think there's still room to grow there, and I think he can add that in. But just the skating and skill combination really puts him in this range. At 17, we have Ryder Ritchie, a right winger of the Prince Albert Raiders. I think he was definitely
big glut of WHLers here.
Yeah,
got
absolutely.
4 consecutive, I believe, right?
3 consecutive.
Oh, Connolly's in there. Yeah.
Trevor Conley, exactly. We have 4 out of the next 5 that are WHLers. So Ryder Ritchie, right winger out of Prince Albert, big, and in terms of his size, doesn't really use that much. He's more of a dangler, stick handler, kind of finesse player. Tisha Ginla, who's Jerome McGinley's son, is 18th overall in our rankings. A really good finisher. He's got that kind of quick motion in the offensive zone that helps him a lot, and the effort level's improved. And on top of that, he's molded his game to his role really well. At 19, we have Trevor Conley. We have to mention him. I mean, there's a confidence to his game that is unmatched in this draft. And I mentioned that in the article, which we'll link down below. The way he takes opponents on one-on-one, the way he kind of moves through pressure, the way he shoulder drops and tries to drive around opponents when they're static at the offensive blue line. Just there's that confidence in him that's really good, and I feel like he's molded his game to more of a playmaking role. He's trying to get the finishing pass on plays rather than trying to shoot everything on net, which he used to do last year. So that's a big progression. And at 20th overall, a player I made a big push for, in Zayne Parekh out of Prince George.
Yeah.
I'll say it again.
Boy.
He reminds me so much of draft year Nick Suzuki every time I watch him. The intelligence on him is off the charts, and yeah, he definitely deserves to be in this top 20 for me. He isn't on most boards. He's a 25 to 32 player on most boards, but you just can't get around that intelligence. But yeah, that wraps things up for our second segment in picks 11 through 20. We'll finish out the top 32 and talk about honorable mentions. We'll kind of rapid fire through this last segment here before a quick word from our sponsors over at Sleeper here at Locked On NHL Prospects.
The new NHL season is here, and it comes with all sorts of possibilities. Your favorite team could hoist the Stanley Cup. Cole Caulfield could score 50 goals, and you can get involved by joining the Sleeper Daily Fantasy Hockey app. Sleeper is the official daily fantasy sports app of the Locked On NHL network, and we especially recommend it for NHL fans. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs of the league like Connor McDavid, I don't know, Sidney Crosby, Leo Carlson's on fire right now, whether they record points in specific categories. And if you get 8 of them correct, you can win 100 times your money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
Alrighty, so closing things off, we'll kind of rifle off the end of the top 32 here. We've got picks 31 through 21 through 32, and a glut of honorable mentions as well that we thought needed mention here in this article. Again, it's going to be posted in the description. It's also, if you just go to dobberprospects.com, it'll probably be the first article you see. You can't miss it, and it's really worth reading. It's a lot of really good work from our team. But yeah, let's start with 21 here on our rankings. We went with Steve Buyam of the University of Denver in the SIAA, and I've been growingly impressed with this game.
Me too.
Yeah, the mobility is fantastic. He closes gaps so well. But on top of that, he processes the game at that speed. I don't think he's a kind of high-end, intelligent player, but he still has that processing speed in order to not be mentally behind his feet, which is something that's really important. And at 22...
He's so versatile, too. Like Buyam. Like I think he's one of my favorite players that we had higher than expected going into the meeting. Like I was quite glad when David made a push for him, because I haven't watched enough for him to personally make that push, but what I have seen has been so impressive. And I mean, the point production speaks for itself already, over a point a game in the NCAA to start his career. But the viewings I've had have just been so much fun. Like one of the more electrifying players in the NCAA already as a draft eligible. So a ton of fun.
Absolutely. And at 22, we have Tanner Howe of the Regina Pats, a player who played a lot with Connor Bedard in his draft year. But now that Connor Bedard's gone, he was expected to kind of take that big step, and he absolutely did. He's by far the producing leader on his team. His 28 points in 21 games so far are actually 5 points clear of anyone else on his team. And the only player, the runner-up to him is a defenseman. So in terms of forwards, there's really no one competing with him. He's in every defensive situation for Regina. I mean, there's just so much to love there. He reminds me a lot of Brendan Gallagher, which we mentioned in the scouting meeting, which is on YouTube as well. That'll be linked down below. But yeah, solid skating, high-end motor, really good board battle mechanics. He wins a lot of his board battles, so lots to love there. At 23rd overall, a player we have probably higher than a lot of rankings do at 23. I made a push for Sacha Boisvert in this range, and Sacha Boisvert, he plays for the Muskegon Lumberjacks out of the USHL, but he's a Quebec-born player. He doesn't have the best skating, and it kind of hinders his defensive game, but mentally, in terms of his processing speed and in terms of the decision making that he makes on the ice with the puck, it's almost irreproachable. I mean, there are so many high skill plays that he makes really well. The way that he kind of takes every puck in stride and makes plays up the ice is really impressive. So I thought he deserved a mention here. And at 24, a player who's pretty much showed up in this range everywhere we see him is Cole Hudson left-handed defenseman at the US NTDP. Talk me through his game.
Yeah, finally a player I pushed for that I got into my slot here. Yeah, I mean, Cole Hudson is one of the most skilled players in this draft class, and easily top 5 in that metric. But the defensive game has been a real struggle this season, and the last viewing I got of him was pretty decent on both sides of the puck. So maybe that's hopeful. But yeah, he fell on our board due to the real dichotomy in this game of the horrible defense with the electrifying elite skill offensively. But with the puck on his stick, you really can't reproach his game. Like in the offensive zone, he's incredibly dynamic. He's so shifty, so deceptive, so creative, really high-end playmaker, really good habits in terms of getting shots off in the high slot, using fake shots to get around forecheckers, like really diverse offensive game and offensive toolkit. But definitely has some warts to iron out, but I'm really hoping that he cracks into our top 15 by the end of the season, because I would love to see him put it all together this year.
Absolutely. That brings us to pick number 25. We have Matvey Shuravin, a player that a left-handed defenseman out of Russia that Graham, our Russian scout, really made a push for. He wasn't in our meeting, but we wanted to respect his wishes, and we made sure to include him here in the top 25. Graham says that not many draft eligible players play with the kind of poise and confidence that Shuravin does, especially when they're playing against grown men in the second best league in the world in the KHL. That's definitely the case for Shuravin. The composure is really impressive. The skating is really impressive. There's still that physical rawness, but I feel like that's going to come with time. At 26, we have Beckett Seneca out of the Oshawa Generals in the OHL. Jordan really liked this prospect, and he probably would have been higher in our rankings if it were for him, but there were so many players to take into consideration in this range that he ended up slipping. 6'3", 180 pounds, really good skill in hands as well, creative. There's a lot to like here. I just can't really point to anything he does as a standout skill, and that's kind of what kept him out of the top 25 conversation. At 27th, though, we have EJ Emery, right-handed defenseman out of the NTDP, a player who really should be playing with Cole Hudson, but doesn't really often.
Really should.
Yeah, really should. I mean, their combination of skills would work really well together. Emery's a really good gap closer, a really good kind of rush defender, and Hudson doesn't have that. So, yeah. At 28th overall, Liam Greentree, another winger from the OHL. I would have liked to have him higher. I wrote his profile, and I've watched a lot of him. He's got 11 goals, 15 games. This goal-scoring ability is off the charts. The ability to find soft ice is really good. But the scanning game kind of keeps him out of this kind of top 25 range for me. I think that's what kind of kept him out of these rankings and why Jordan wasn't as on board with him. But yeah, he's got a rifle of a shot, and he really knows how to open up in the offensive zone to use it. He reminds me a bit of Yzerman in some ways. But yeah, that brings us to pick number 21, a player you've watched a lot and you really made a push for in the top 32, Andrew Basha.
Yeah, ton of fun. Really, really skilled, especially in transition. So dynamic, the puck on a stick. Has been playing some excellent hockey next to Cayden Lindstrom. Their chemistry has been one of the big reasons for both of their successes. They mesh really, really well. And I've seen enough here that I was pushing for him, I think, as early as 22nd, 23rd overall, but didn't have the popular support there. Yeah, ton of fun, really dynamic, and I think that there's the upside here for him to rise a decent amount up our board, and maybe not quite as high as he went on EP's first board, but a little bit higher than we had him here.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's got a safe floor, but I'm not really sold on the kind of higher upside, this is about where you'd put a player like that. So yeah, that brings us to pick number 30. Another player you've watched a whole lot, and Henry Muse. And
watched way more of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, Henry Muse watched basically every home game he's played in the OHL in his career, but he's a really interesting case, and ranking him is really a philosophical matter rather than an evaluative one. Anyone that watches Muse play sees how mobile a defenseman he is. In flashes, he is a really effective transition defender, keeping a really tight gap, matches footwork really nicely. On the cycle, he can become a little bit static, but with a puck on his stick in transition and in the offensive zone, there's so much skill there. The combination of mobility and handling skill and deception is one of the better ones among blue liners outside the really elite ones in those categories in this class. And I believe that with added aggression in his offensive game, that he would be able to unlock a couple higher levels of offensive
Yeah.
skill. He's already a really good slot passer, looking to shift defensive structures, try to like create and access different passing lanes. And that said, he can be a bit hesitant to go above the hash marks, and I think that limits him a fair amount. But my theory is that's a systemic issue with the Ottawa 67s, because I saw the same thing happen with Mintyukov when he got traded there last year. So I was kind of in favor of having him a little bit higher than this based on off of that theoretical upside with the tools. But anywhere in that 25 to 30 range was completely fair from you. So I was okay with where he fell. As long as he got into the first round, I was pretty happy.
Yeah, for sure. And that then we have pick number 31 in Cole Baudouin out of Barrie in the OHL. A big puck protecting kind of player. Likes to get pucks off the boards. But you described him as a player who plays a fairly linear style. Doesn't use as that lateral movement as much. And yeah, that the weaknesses kind of keep him out of this range, but the upside is fairly interesting. Especially the shot, I think, is really impressive.
For sure.
And pick number 32 would be Emil Hemming out of TPS in the Finnish Junior 20 division. Andy Karvinen likes this prospect a decent amount. A shoot first winger with good tools. He skates well and has a powerful stride. He's a quite skillful puck handler, and most notably, that shot is just off the charts. But yeah, that brings us to that's our top 32. Let's talk real quick about the honorable mentions before we let you guys go. First and foremost, my honorable mention is Will Skahan, left-handed defenseman out of the NTDP. Plays a fairly kind of straightforward game. Gap control's good. He's aggressive, loves to punish opponents physically, but his decision making keeps him out of our first round so far. Sacha Lagarde, who's our QMJHL scout, went for Carter Yakimchuk, right-handed defenseman, out of Calgary in the WHL. Big, rangy right-handed defenseman. He's got good size, aggressiveness, offensive potential, but the defensive game is really rough. The production's definitely impressive, but the defensive game is struggling. David Stodd's honorable mention is Michael Hage out of Chicago, in the USHL. He's a skillful player, but not really defensively aware at all. So that's kind of keeping him out there. Luke Sweeney really tried to make a push for Clark Caswell, but Clark Caswell, who's a left winger out of Swift Current in the WHL, we're not there yet, but I think with larger sample size and more time to kind of review him, we'll see where that goes. You went for Andre Kosh out of Ilves in the U20 Junior League in Finland.
I like him.
Yeah, smart, really defensively solid.
Really defensively solid, but I'm banking on that European defensive winger development trajectory right now, because we see it every year with defensive forwards kind of breaking the mold and breaking up rankings as the year progresses here.
Yeah, for sure. And your other honorable mention was Leo Salin Valenius out of Växjö in the J20 National in Sweden. Mobile, composed, does some flashes of playmaking, but we're not in first round territory yet. Annie Karvinen went for Vetti Väisänen out of Koko in the Liga, another left-handed defenseman who's really got that mobility. He's got that kind of ranginess to him. The offensive zone activation is kind of good, but I don't see the puck skills yet. Maxime Mossé is another honorable mention, a right winger out of Chicoutimi, a player who we've received some flack for not having in our first rounds. But yeah, I mean, it's just the scanning is so bad. It's just it's really holding him back. A couple other names to end things off. We've got Igor Surin out of Yaroslavl in the MHL. He looked like a first rounder last year, but it's been a struggle so far. So yeah, we're still kind of on the fence regarding him. And our only goalie mentioned in the article, Colin Hunter, our goalie scout, made an honorable mention for Ryerson Leenders out of Mississauga. Really, really good numbers. His processing is extremely good. His puck tracking solid, and he's a really mobile player, really mobile goaltender. But his lack of size really holds him back in that sense. But that wraps things up for today's show and for our breakdown of our article, our top 32 and honorable mentions for the 2024 NHL Draft. If you like what you've been watching, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports. Then make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our prospects coverage for the 2024 NHL draft and for the 2023-24 NHL season overall. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian Hi, and we hope you tune in next time.